Yes, it's switched on. Thank you. So thank you very much for inviting me to talk this afternoon, and it's an honour to talk to you all and a pleasure. WWF has come to realise in our most recent strategy, you might think this is obvious, but that agriculture is the thing that is both most destroying biodiversity and also has the greatest contribution to make to biodiversity. And that's why we've focused in our current strategy so strongly on food. And food matters to people, so it's a way of engaging emotionally with people about what the impact of agriculture is and how they can be linked to it. And most of the food that we eat in Britain, which is where the people who WWF UK works with, comes from either Britain or from Europe nearby. So we do pay attention to food that comes from miles away, and that's why we're concerned about palm oil. And that's why we're particularly concerned about soy, because much of the livestock in the UK is grown from soy, and that has a huge impact in places like the Cerrado. So it's important that we work on those things, but it's also important, if we're going to reduce the impact of agriculture, that we find ways to transform the food system from being a system that destroys nature to being a system that restores and conserves nature. And that's partly about what we eat. So you heard Richard Smith say it's about eating less meat and better meat. So we have been working for a long time now, since about 2010, on what people's diets need to be in order that they have less impact on the environment. So that's really important, and that will have an impact on what we grow and what we produce. So we would want to see less meat produced but better meat produced, so that farmers can make more money from a higher quality product. But it also means changing the way that we farm, and the challenge is that for most farmers, the way that they farm has been driven by having really high amounts of fossil fuels going through the system, and that the cost of using bought-in energy in the form of fertilizer or in the form of fuel or in the form of plant protection products has been more economic for farmers than and simpler as a growing system. So you've had these very simplified growing systems that have evolved that are relatively easy for farmers to use, but which make much less use of nature and of biodiversity. So if we're going to have nature restored, then we need to find a value for farmers in nature. And either you pay farmers through agri-environment schemes to directly produce the public goods that people want, or you have to find a way of giving value to nature in what gets produced, which is what you've been seeing here today. You've been seeing a brilliant business adding fantastic value to get much more money back to the land so that the land can be restored. So you've heard from people who are working on getting those kind of techniques involved. But for mainstream farmers, that's really difficult. It's a really difficult change to make from having used this simplified system where you're putting lots of energy through and you've cut lots of labor out of the system, you've cut lots of biology and all the complexity out of the system, moving in a big system way back or onwards to farming that's organically certified or that's biodynamic or that's really rich in nature is really difficult for them, because they don't have the knowledge, they haven't grown up with the knowledge over generations now of the last 2 generations of being able to do that. So what we're interested in at WWF is how can we help to begin to reintroduce that knowledge to mainstream farmers, so that farmers begin, as was being said earlier, begin to be thinking about themselves as not just producing food, but producing more than food and using more than just energy and fertilizers in order to do that. So there's a number of things that we're doing to do that. So we're working at a number of levels. So we have a partnership with Tesco that's looking both at changing the diet that Tesco provides to people, but with the objective of halving the impact of the average shopping basket. So it's great what Dalesford's doing, and it provides a fantastic beacon. How can we mainstream that? How can we get it so that many more farmers in the country, many more food consumers are consuming food that's better for nature, and that farmers are growing it in a way that's better for nature? So the idea is to halve the environment. And then we're also thinking about how we can reach out to these mainstream farmers and scratch where it itches for them. How can we introduce agroecological techniques into mainstream farming? Well, it has to start from where do they have a problem, and how can agroecology help them to solve where those problems are? So we're working with people like Agritech East to think about, could we have a round table where existing farmers get together and talk about where agroecology could provide them with solutions. And we're also looking at so there are many farmers who are quite hard to reach, and we're reaching out to them by investing in a national network of farmer discussion groups, which brings together farmer groups that have already been established and already talk amongst themselves, and starts to introduce to them ideas about how they might think differently about their farming, both in terms of what they produce and in terms of how they produce it. Now, obviously, for that to be safe for them, that's got to be on their terms. If you just go and try and tell them what to do and say that they've got to be nature friendly, that doesn't make any sense to them. It's got to be in terms of what the way that they're interested in coming out and talking and engaging with the rest of society about the relationship between farmers and the rest of society. So we're also working in those kinds of ways with farmers. I think that's the essence of what I wanted to say, but it's really important to create this bridge across to the mainstream sector. We're also, I want to talk about working with policy. So we're going to be facing a major revolution in the way that agriculture is funded in the next 7 years. So with the proposals that have been introduced into the agriculture bill, there won't be any income support for farming. There will only be environmental support for farming, and some support for productivity. So that provides a real challenge for farming. So you could see a huge change, which would make it very much easier for Daylesford to expand its business model, because there'll be lots of people going out of business who won't be able to run livestock farming as small farmers anymore. But it's also a challenge for the structure of the countryside and the way that people make a living from the land. We're really interested in how you can get, if you look round now, you'll see that there'll be what this farm owns, and maybe it's all in sight what this farm owns, but there's a wider landscape, and if we want the rivers to be clean, we need everybody to be contributing to that. So what we're proposing is that there'll be a way of planning for the countryside, which is not like you've got to put this here and you've got to put that there, but rather, if you want that river to be clean, then everybody needs to contribute towards it. So the guy who's closest to the bank needs to be having trees and vegetation to absorb any nutrients which are coming down the hill from above. And then the people who are further away, well then, if that's a really steep slope, then perhaps you shouldn't be having bare soil on that slope where it's steep. You need to have trees on that slope where it's steep. So you need to have a conversation between the people who are managing the land in that area, the farmers in that area, and the rest of society, and what the rest of society wants from that wider landscape. So we're also engaging in promoting discussions between non-farming groups and farming groups, but we're saying the government needs to facilitate that dialogue between farmers and others to plan at a landscape level, so that we as a society get what we want from the land in terms of clean water, in terms of flood mitigation, and that farmers are paid for those services. So this money that's going to be available in the budget, and it's going to be critical in the next couple of years, how much money the Treasury puts into that, how much money. So a really important thing that's going to happen if we get Brexit is there will be a comprehensive spending review, and in that comprehensive spending review, which will come at the same time as the budget, this is work in the next 6 to 9 months, the Treasury will decide how much money it's going to pay to support British agriculture. And if we only manage to get a very low budget settlement, then all the things that we would like to see farmers do that are more than they can get from the price of their food won't get done as much. So there's a critical juncture over the coming period about how that gets funded, and making as strong arguments as we can about the importance of sequestering carbon in the soil to prevent to reduce climate change or to reverse climate change, and about the protection of the quality of water and all the other things that we want from the land alongside food production. Thank you.